Alrighty, we are live. G'day guys, welcome once again to the Tripod. This is Alex and Jacob, and every week we'll break down every single game in the NRL from a punting perspective. This week we'll be breaking down round 3 in the NRL. Bit of a disappointing week last week, going 4-7 on our best bets, but as you would have seen in the graphic, over the first 2 weeks of the season, if you'd put $100 on every single one of our best bets, you would be up $580, and if you put $50 on every single one of our multis, you'd be up $684. So still well over $1,000 in profit for an average size punter over the first 2 weeks, which is quite good. Jacob, how are you, buddy?
Good, thanks, mate. Yeah, thank you to everyone who's tuning in that haven't given up on us after one bad round. Honestly, to hit the 60% win rate, which is what our goal is every season, that is a great achievement, and anybody who can do that with a large sample size, I'm genuinely impressed. But just because we have done it 4 out of 4 seasons, we can't take it for granted. We're sitting here 64% after 2 rounds. We've got to be happy with that. But in saying that, last week did not go how we wanted. We actually have a really good record of bouncing back any week after we've kind of, been humbled. So looking forward to doing that tonight. The toughest part of getting back on the punt after a rough round is having a good hard look at the games that you bet and saying, was I wrong in my assessment of some teams? Am I making some kind of wrong judgments? Or did some of the games just not break our way? And both of those things can happen, and that is tough for a punter. You can't always say, oh, I'm always right, and when I lose, I'm unlucky. Sometimes you do make mistakes. We try not to make too many. But with us, both of us having our own opinions and coming together on a Wednesday night to talk about the games, we'll hopefully get some of the right answers moving for round 3.
Oh, definitely, and that's why it's very beneficial. I know, a lot of people don't have time to do that, to watch every game, but it is beneficial to watch every game, at least that way you can kind of see whether you were on the right side or not, whether you made a bad bet and you can learn from it, or whether you were on the right side and you just got a little bit unlucky. So moving into round 3, I think last year, we didn't have back-to-back losing weeks in the NRL, but of course, now that I've said that, I've probably jinxed it. So let's kick things off with the Thursday night game. The Broncos laying 8 points against the Dragons at Suncorp Stadium. 36.5 is the total. You may wonder why the total is so low, but if you live even in and around Brisbane, you will have noticed it's been absolutely pissing down rain for the last, for all of today. That's meant to continue all the way through game time tomorrow, so it should be a soppy game. This is one of those ones where you've got, this is going to be a pros versus Joes kind of game, I feel. The public is going to be all over the Broncos after shellacking the Cowboys at Suncorp Stadium last week. And you've got a Dragons side that the public could not be lower on. And for good reason, they're 0-2 with 2 pretty disappointing losses, and, Frizzell and DeBellin still out. I lean Dragons in this one, but there's no hurry for me. I think, with the line sitting at 8.5 now, I think that's only going to climb. There's only going to be Broncos money, and that's the only side that I could look. The only side that I could look is the Dragons. I think in an 0-2 hole with just the media heaping shit on them, this is an absolute desperation spot for them. If a team falls into an 0-3 hole in a short NRL season, you can almost wave goodbye to your finals hopes.
Yeah, that's right. This is 2 teams heading in very opposite directions, as you said. Last time we saw both these teams, on the Channel 9 nationally televised game, Broncos very impressive, and the Dragons, fell into a heap of shit in that second half against the Bunnies. Revenge factors worth mentioning, because we were at Suncorp Stadium in week 1 of the finals last year, where the Broncos were about 8 or 10 point favourites, and the Broncos got out to like a 10-0 lead, and we thought they were going to roll them. A lot of best bets we had on that game were on the Dragons. The final score was 48-18. It was one of the most ridiculous turns in a game you've ever seen. Tarek Sims just put on a hat-trick in the first half. The game swung like you wouldn't believe. The Broncos were shell-shocked. They got to remember that. It's not only getting your season ended by this team, but that's embarrassing in your home ground to lose by 30 in a spot like that. Widdop is still at number 1 and doesn't want to play there, and they've got this whole debacle in their spine where Dufty comes on and 4 other players have to move position.
So weird.
Corey Norman and Ben Hunt both up against their former team. I know that they'll want to have a big game, and Hunt did get the last laugh last season, as I mentioned. Corbin Sims against his old team as well, and he's debuting this season. They will need a little bit extra punch off the bench. The Dragons, we've spoken about, they're short-handed. And look, Brisbane is a team that I picked to come second this year. They're going to improve every week. Just because they went gangbusters last week, I wouldn't assume that they're a finished product. So they're not a team I'm desperate to bet on early in the season. I think they've only got improvement in them. And as you mentioned, the Dragons, this has to be a kitchen sink game. Now, if they don't win this game, they have to at least compete. If they come out again, in front of everyone Thursday night, first game of the round, and just get rolled, well, where do they go from there? Honestly, Widdop will want to be packing his bags going to England. So I'm with you. I would be leaning to the Dragons. I'd actually want double digits because I know Brisbane's the better team and at home and could roll them. I'd want plus 10, so we'll wait and see if we can get that.
Yeah, we'll definitely wait and see if we can get double digits, and I think that line's only going to leak up. And I see some comments flowing through saying bench Corey Norman, and I can't disagree. I feel as though he might be the bench utility guy that comes on late in the game. Because dead set, every time I watch him, he seems disinterested. Anyway, next one up, we've got the Raiders laying 2.5 points against the Knights. The Raiders are at home, and the total is 38.5. Once again, a lowish total for these two types of teams, but that is because there is rain expected down in Canberra for Friday around that time. I actually really like the under in this one, and I like the Raiders as well. I do think that I have made no mistake that I'm very high on the Raiders this season. Said that in the pre-season pod. I still do think that the Raiders at this stage in the season are the better team than the Knights. I know that the Knights will improve as the season goes on, but as we've seen, there are still some growing pains there, and it'll take some time whenever you have a lot of new recruits for that chemistry to form. I think the Raiders are the slightly better team. They have a decent home field advantage. I will give them at least 2.5 points for home field advantage. And another thing we know about the Knights is that they're a much better home team than away team. They have a very strong home road dichotomy. They've played their first two games at home. Two very, inspiring, good performances, a close loss to the Panthers and obviously a win in round one against the Sharkies. But now they have to head on the road. I think the Raiders get the chocolates here, and I think at 38.5, if there's going to be rain there, this total may close around the 36.5 mark as well. That's why we've got a bunch of under bets there on the board, and possibly I would want to have another look tomorrow and see if we can get a few more plays on the Raiders there. But I'll read out those plays that we've got on the board after you have a chat, Jacob.
Yeah, for me, you say the Raiders are the better team. I have these two teams very evenly matched, and both have got a lot of similarities. Both, impressive wins in round one, and then both brought back to earth in round two. Both sides want nothing less than to make the top 8, which just makes this a huge game. I see this as like one of the big games of round 3 because it's very even, and both teams desperate to get to a 2-1 start after both starting badly last season as well. Tappane's out for the Raiders, which is going to weaken them a little bit. The Knights go in unchanged, but they've got their own issues. I say they were named unchanged, but we've heard pretty much Connor Watson won't play in this game.
Correct.
To me, the logic is to, accept that it's not the right choice to put Ponga in the halves at this stage. Put him to fullback, especially now you've got this opportunity to do so. But we're hearing maybe Kurt Mann goes back there and they persist with Ponga. They don't want to admit they were wrong. But these are critical games, and Ponga is not as effective at 5'8", and it weakens the Knights' backline. And the biggest edge I can see in this game is the Raiders outside 5 versus the Knights. I feel like Kotrick is a genuine superstar of the game. Rapana came back and looked great last week. And for the Knights, it's like Jesse Ramian hasn't overly impressed me this season. They moved Ponga out of their outside backs. Well, I don't see match winners in their outside backs. But I would give a small edge to the Knights forward pack and bench. So pretty even game, and I do think we've seen that the Raiders are really focusing on defence, and the Knights have been a lot better defensively this year too. And in what should be a tight game, played in the evening, and potentially some adverse weather as well down in Canberra. I'm also with you with unders and a lean to the Raiders.
Yeah, and we've got 3 best bets on this one. I'll read them out there for you guys that are listening in podcast form and not watching live. We're taking the Knights team total under 18.5 points. That one is $1.88 on BetEasy. We're taking the Raiders under 22.5 points. That is $1.88 on BetEasy. And I'll clarify that one, even though we are leaning Raiders, that team total is 2 points higher than anywhere else. So we just had to pull the trigger because we lean unders. And thirdly, we'll take the Knights team total under 9.5 points in the first half. That one is $1.88, also on BetEasy. Next game up, let me just change the graphic there. Next game up, we got the Eels plus 6.5 points hosting the Roosters. 42.5 is the total. Very interesting game, this one for me. I mean, the Eels started the season, no one was very high on them. It's exactly the opposite of the way they started the season before, obviously they went 0-6 in their first 6 games last season. Everyone was fucking heaping shit on them this year. And we kind of said in the preseason pod, this Eels team is probably one of those teams that you're going to want to bet on early on just because everyone else is so down on them. Now they've won 2 on the trot. and the public's starting to like the Eels here, and you can see that, a 6.5 points against the defending champs seems like a crazy line, but in my eyes, I would probably lean Roosters in this one. I just think they are going to be well too good for the Eels, and I think that, the Roosters aren't going to look over the Eels. If the Eels went 0-2 and the Roosters were 2-0, I think this could be a bit of a letdown spot for the Roosters, but, the Eels are 2-0, they're playing good footy. It's not like the Roosters are they're only 1-1. They're going to want to win this game, and they're going to need to win this game to shore up home field and that kind of thing in the finals. So, at 6.5, I would probably lean towards the Roosters' way. But even so, I know that the Eels will show up at home with that plus 6.5. So it's a tough one for me.
Yeah, maybe one where the bookies are probably doing the right thing with that number at 6.5, because neither side is jumping out at me, basically because I don't want to bet against either of these teams. Michael Jennings comes back into an Eels side that is brimming with confidence, and they're loving their footy, and they're putting in on both sides of the ball, and then the Roosters, we know how clinical they are, and now you add Cooper Cronk and Jake Friend back into this team, and I really can't find an area of the field where I could say the Eels have the advantage. I know Fergo's up against his old team, and that's going to bring even more energy. We spoke on our recap pod about how awesome Fergo's been.
Bloody good last week.
You have better outside backs on the Roosters, I'd still say. Better halves, obviously, with like the form that Keary's in, and the forward pack edge as well. As much as the Eels forwards are putting in this guy like Niokore in the second row there, and Paulo's a good signing, I could see the Eels definitely hanging tough and hanging with the Roosters in this game. So I'm tempted, but at the same time, as you mentioned, the Roosters are lower on the ladder. They want to prove a point, and they'll be a bit disappointed letting in 18 late points against Manly too. So they know they need to keep improving. So at this stage, I don't have a best bet on the game.
And we don't have a best bet on this game. We do, however, have some best bets on the... no, we don't, sorry. Actually, oh my gosh, I've forgotten to actually write these ones down. Anyway, Do you have them in front of you?
I've
got them in front of me. I can read them out anyway.
You can type them in. This would be groundbreaking on a live video, but you could type them in as I talk about the game. You could try it, but give the people your thoughts first.
All right, I'll give it a crack anyway. So we've got Manly +4 against the Warriors. It technically is Manly hosting the Warriors, but that one is going to be over in Christchurch. Now, very, very interesting game here. Now, obviously, you have Manly coming in with a little bit of confidence. Obviously, they're 0-2. They are a desperate side, but they've named Tommy Turbo in this one. Now, it's probably coming back a little bit earlier than expected, but that's a big boost for them if he does play, if he does actually suit up. Now, we've got the Warriors who actually got shellacked over the weekend against the Tigers. Just absolutely embarrassing performance. They'll want to bounce back from that one. And the game is in Christchurch. Now, after all that's happened in New Zealand, in Christchurch over the past couple of weeks, I think this is going to be a massive game for the Warriors. I think they completely show up, and I think that not going down the rabbit hole or anything, but I think the calls are going to go the Warriors' way. The Warriors are going to want to win this one. The rest are going to try and, I think, maybe help the Warriors win this one. The crowd is going to be absolutely pumped. The Warriors are going to be 100% trying to bring something to Christchurch after just a terrible 2 weeks. So I think the Warriors completely show up for this one. I think Manly probably shows up too, 0-2, pretty desperate. But I think that the Warriors, with a pretty good home field advantage, I think you could say, even though the game's not in Auckland, I think they get the job done. Let me try and edit this or see how we go.
These best bets, but we're not conspiracy theorists. If you're in our punting group, there will be people who will post from time to time, "Oh boys, this game's fixed," and all this kind of stuff, and we don't subscribe to that. But it's more the case that in front of a very emotional crowd and a full house, I'm sure, in Christchurch, it'll be hard to believe that the Warriors will get a lot of stiff calls. There will be a bit of pressure, and I just feel it is probably a good thing that this game happens to be in Christchurch. That events have hurt that country so badly, and I feel like the Warriors, the opportunity to play in that city, that can bring some positivity in, and I feel like there's just no excuse for a bad performance. A team like the Warriors that can be hot and cold, they've got a huge responsibility to show up for this one. But as you said, you don't want to bet against teams that are winless in round 3 of the NRL too often. So I expect a big performance out of Manly as well. Now, Turbo named, but there's still that chance that he flies over there and trains and isn't 100%. And, you could just be playing some games with your opposition where they don't know for sure. Just because he's been named, they've got to prepare for him, but he may not take the field. So if you're betting on the Warriors, you may get a super nice surprise in the next couple of days. that Turbo actually won't play. So there's that to consider. And otherwise, if you were betting on Manly, you're bloody hoping that he's good to go. So that's a concern with Manly. They do also return Adam Fanua-Blake, and we've spoken about how they got no depth, but they don't have any key injuries in the forwards yet. So Manly's forward pack can still compete in this game. But I think New Zealand is the better team, and although you're seeing Manly written first, the game is in New Zealand, as we said, in Christchurch. So it's kind of like a home field advantage to New Zealand as well. We think that they will cover a small number. So we've got a few best bets towards New Zealand and the unders.
Yes, and you guys should be able to see that edited screen up on the board now, but we're taking the Warriors straight up in the first half, so that's just to win the first half in a two-way market. That one's $1.80 on BetEasy. We're taking Manly team total under 19.5 points. That one is $1.88 also on BetEasy. And we're taking under 20.5 points in the first half. That one is $1.88 also on BetEasy. You'll notice that we've had a lot of plays on BetEasy today, and it's just because we kind of looked on there and just happens that they must have released all of these plays fairly recently within the last sort of hour or two. So none of them had been bet or anything yet. So,
but not just that, this is the first week this season that they've added team totals. They didn't have team totals in round 1 and 2, and they're going to regret that they posted them today, let me tell you.
Idiots. Silly old BetEasy. Next up, we've got the Cowboys hosting the Sharks. The Cowboys are now underdogs. They're plus 1.5 points in Townsville. The total is 36.5. Another low total, but if you've been following the weather, you know that it's basically a monsoon there in North Queensland at the moment, and that's meant to continue all the way through game time and throughout the weekend, so it should be a wet game. This line opened Cowboys 2.5, 3.5 point favourites, and then obviously the weekend happened, and the Cowboys got just crushed by the Broncos, and the Sharks beat the Titans, and the Cowboys lost Taumalolo. So that line has shifted now, and now the Cowboys are slight underdogs. I like the Cowboys here. I know that Taumalolo is a massive loss. You cannot understate it. But, well, you know, to be fair, I think that Cowboys forward pack can still hang with the Sharks. You know, Josh Maguire has to do a job there, and they've got enough there in the forward pack, I think, to hang with the Sharks and possibly get over the top of them. Very, very strong home field advantage there in Townsville. I give them about a 3 to 3.5 point home field advantage in Townsville. So you're telling me that the Sharks are more than 4 points better than the Cowboys? I don't think so. I think the Cowboys show up for this one. Bit of a reshuffle, obviously. Jake Clifford moves to 5'8", and Kahu moves into the centres, and Tamari Martin moves to fullback. I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing ever. I think the Cowboys show up here off a really, really embarrassing loss to Big Brother at Suncorp, and I think the Cowboys win the game as a small dog.
Yeah, let's talk about Jason Taumalolo, and I'll pose a question to you. Is there any forward in the NRL, and people watching can comment as well, is there any forward on any team that would affect the quality of their team more than losing Taumalolo? Like any player who's more valuable to their team, at least a forward. Have a little think if you can think of anyone, but I feel like it can't be understated what a monumental loss that is. He's such a monster, and we talk about the Cowboys as being one of the elite forward packs in the comp, but when you lose the best forward in the game for me, that is such a big downgrade because it's on paper it's a great pack. But Matt Scott's best years are behind him. To be honest, so are Gavin Cooper's. And even Maguire, although I think Maguire's got a little bit more in the tank and pressure on him. And a guy like McLean.
Someone said Scott Minto, Jacob.
Scott Minto, you've got me there. Okay, Scott Minto. I could argue that he's more of a winger, but you know he'd do a job for you if you put him in the forward pack, put him at prop. But a guy like Jordan McLean, great, season with the Storm. I think the year they won the comp, the year they made the grand final. No, the year they won the comp, but then injured last year. And he needs to prove it as well. So as much as we say this is a great forward pack, now's the time where they need to step up. But, we've spoken about the Sharkies. They're missing Wade Graham. They're not 100%. But I tell you, a guy who never gets any raps, so I'll give him a quick one now. Aaron Woods is overqualified to be coming off the bench. He actually really, fortifies that Sharks pack when they make their substitutions. They stay strong, and they are a solid outfit. You spoke about the backline shuffle for the Cowboys. I like it. What have I been saying for the last few weeks? Justin O'Neill and Tom Opachik, that strikes fear into the hearts of nobody, and you need actual playmakers in your outside backs. And to bring in Benny Hampton and Kahu, I think that's a better centres pairing, and I think Tamari Martin offers a different flair at fullback. So I think that's an improvement. And you've got the home field advantage for the Cowboys. You've got poor weather conditions. That should keep the game closer as well. And as we spoke about on Sunday, I think that final score flattered the Sharks a bit because the Titans were so wasteful with their opportunities. The Titans played the Sharks pretty evenly, at least in the middle of the field, with just zero execution in attack. We'll get to the Titans later. So I'm with you with the Cowboys and maybe leaning unders in this game too.
To answer your question, Jacob, because you can't see the comments flowing through, but there are a lot flowing through for Tavita Pangai Jr., I would just say that he needs to prove himself more than one beastly game in order to be even considered in the same echelon as Taumalolo.
Let's continue that point. It's pretty interesting. I wouldn't say Pangai Jr. because the Broncos have a very deep pack as well, and they got lots of other players that can carry the load. And when you talk about a team losing a forward, you've got to think about who they got to replace them. And a guy that comes to mind would be Jake Trbojevic. If he goes out for Manly, they're fucked. True. And another guy, Sam Burgess, very important to his team. Whereas the guys who are stars on teams that are loaded aren't as valuable just because there's more depth. But it's an interesting topic.
It's quite funny, actually, that you say that because, Taumalolo, as we've seen with the line movement, I mean, it's obviously coupled with the Cowboys losing last week and the Sharks winning last week, but he is quite obviously valuable in a line move, but they still have a very deep pack. So that just shows how valuable he is, even with a very deep pack there. All right, so we've got 3 plays on the game. Let me just read them out to you guys. It's been sitting up there for a few minutes anyway. We're taking the Cowboys winning at halftime or full time. That one is $1.83 on Sportsbet. We'll take the Cowboys plus 1 point in the first half. That one's $1.90 on BetEasy. And we'll take the Sharks team total under 19.5. That one is also $1.88 on BetEasy. Let's move on to the Panthers, plus 4.5 points, technically hosting the Storm, but it is a neutral ground there in Bathurst. And 37.5 is the total. God, I wish we got onto this one earlier. This line opened at 2.5 points to the Storm, and I had a look at that one, and I was like, fuck, that line does seem low. And of course now it's shifted all the way up to 4.5. I get that the Panthers had a good win over the Knights, but like I said kind of last week, I thought that was a pretty coin toss game, and if the Knights could have just as easily won that, and if they did win that, this line probably would have opened 4.5 anyway. But it opened 2.5, and now that's obviously shifted up because the Storm are absolutely clinical. I mean, they took care of the Raiders in pretty poor conditions there in Canberra, and they are still, I would say, at this very point in time, at round 3, they are playing the best out of any team in the comp. The Panthers get Mansour back. Isaiah Yeo is out for the Raiders, out for the Panthers. And I just think that the Storm is an absolutely clinical team. I know that they were only laying 4 points to the Raiders last week, and you can say that, the Raiders are worse than the Panthers. This is not a Panthers home field. This is in Carrington Park in Bathurst. It's a complete neutral venue. I get that it's in New South Wales, so maybe you give the Panthers a little less travel time. But the Storm are absolutely clinical. They're going to get the job done here, and we've found some very, very good lines here that will not be there tomorrow. And that's the reason we do this live pod. We sort of said to ourselves, like, we're not going to try and give out too many plays on the live pod, but if we see something that we don't think is going to be there or we don't think is going to be there tomorrow morning, we're going to give it out now. And I don't think these are going to last too long.
Plus a reward for all the good folks out there who do tune in and watch us live. So giving you value that you might not be able to snap up tomorrow if you just wait till we post it, on our app and in our group. You mentioned Mansour's in, that's a big in, but Isaiah Yeo is a big loss when you're still waiting on Bill Kickout. Now, can anyone explain to me what happened with Isaiah Yeo? He cops a concussion in week 1. He can't train or do anything for 5 days, got to get through the protocol, gets cleared to play only a day before the game. About 5 minutes in against the Knights, cops an elbow to the head, he's dazed and he's out. Yeah. The commentary team even says, he hasn't cleared the concussion, but even if he does, Ivan Cleary cares too much about him as a person, he wouldn't have put him in. Oh yeah, it all makes sense. Massive loss for Panthers, but all right. And then a few minutes later, he's on the field.
Yes.
And what would have infuriated Knights fans even more is he scored a soft try against the Knights defence soon after that flipped the game as well. So it's kind of bizarre. And now he is out. So I don't know how they got away with putting him back on the field. But as I said, he's an important contributor in that back row there. I think the Panthers are a side that, because for those reasons, they've got more improvement in them too when they do get everyone back on deck. But something interesting I was thinking about, Ivan Cleary beat the Storm twice last year, 2 from 2, with a worse squad, you'd probably say a less talented squad, in the Tigers. Beat him in Billy Slater's 300th in Melbourne, and then got him again when the Storm definitely didn't get snuck up on, beat them again in New Zealand. And if you throw a little bit more revenge in there, the Panthers beat the Storm in the final regular season game last year, which ultimately cost them the minor premiership as well. So there's a bit to like.
We were on the Panthers in that one.
Yeah, we were on the Panthers. That was nice. But the Storm definitely won't get taken by surprise here. And I just do not want to bet money against this Melbourne Storm team when they're full strength like early in the year. Another factor I've kind of noticed with the refs keeping their whistle in their pocket a little bit more this season, while it allows the games to flow more, it is giving an advantage to the teams that manipulate the ruck a bit more. And that's what the Storm do so well, and they slow down the opponent. And they're definitely benefiting from that, and they will continue to do that. So there's a reason why you actually do need penalties in the game, because otherwise smart teams will exploit it, and there's no smarter than the Storm. And for that reason, I think we have to take the Storm again. It'll be the third week in a row we'll be betting on them, but once again we can lay a small number.
Yep, indeed, and we've got three best bets there up on the board. We've got the Storm minus 3.5 points. That one is $1.80 on both Ladbrokes and on Neds. You find that in the alternate line market. We're taking the Storm minus 1.5 points in the first half. That one is $1.80 on Sportsbet. And we're taking the Panthers under 8.5 points in the first half. That one is $1.88 on BetEasy. Moving on to the Sunday games, we've got the Tigers laying 6.5 points hosting the Bulldogs. 41.5 is the total. Another one of those games where I don't have a strong lean at this point. I understand that the Bulldogs are probably the sharp side here. An 0-2 team playing a 2-0 team, you kind of always want to go that way. But the Tigers are playing good footy, and they're full of confidence after a big win last week against the Warriors. But I just know that, after no one's betting the Bulldogs, none of the public is betting the Bulldogs, they're all going to be betting the Tigers here. So I can only see this line kind of climbing towards 8.5 points, maybe come game time. And at that point, I would probably pull the trigger on the Bulldogs. I know it's the ugly duckling, but I just think that at 0-2, in a fully desperation spot, you're reshuffling the whole team. I think if you can't get up for this one against the Tigers, then you've got no hope in your season. And to be fair, the Bulldogs probably don't have any hope this season, but they don't know that yet, or they shouldn't. So they should be up for this one. I just think this is a very square side to take the Tigers here, and I just can't do it, even though they probably win the game. But if this line ticks up towards 8.5, I would absolutely have to take the Bulldogs in what would be a kitchen sink game. If they're 0-3, that you can strike a line through them, they're done for the season.
Yeah, these guys train so hard, prepare so much through the off season to turn up. You can't give up 2 games into, a 26-week season. So we do expect that, a winless team is going to throw the kitchen sink in here. And they've made the mass changes, and some of the changes that I was calling for literally on Sunday, saying, you sign this Nick Meaney, put him at fullback, We didn't get to see a lot of him when he played at the Knights, but I hear that he's a, talented first grader. And Hopewadi's not even necessarily a natural fullback. He can do a job for you in the centres and actually improve that position. And Reece Martin, what's he done wrong? I don't know.
I know.
Has he gone on a date with bloody Dean Pay's daughter or something? We shouldn't even get into that kind of stuff, actually. But what's he done wrong? Finally, he's at least in the 17 now, and a few blokes have been dropped out of the forwards there, and they've got to step up. Now, it's still a weak team, even though I think they've improved their squad. And look at a guy like Dylan Napa. He just doesn't have the bite. He's just not that big puppy that we wanted this year. And you think back to last year.
He's not running as hard as he was last year.
And he's meant to be their big buy. And you think he's replacing Dave Clemmer, who even on a shitty Dogs team last year always stood out and always lifted that team. So he's gone. They lost Aaron Woods and by mid-season last year as well. They're still hurting from the fact that Des backloaded all those contracts and screwed their salary cap. And that's just the harsh reality that this Dogs team is kind of screwed. We'll compare that to the Tigers. Congratulations. First time in the history of the West Tigers merged club that they are top of the ladder. And that's about a 20-year history. So that's exciting. And you know what? They'll probably stay top of the ladder because I'm with you. They probably win this game. But we don't want to lay, over 6.5 points. We've kind of spoken about that. And one other thing I would say about the Tigers, 2 impressive wins. But they played 2 teams that I would say are both below average. I didn't have the Warriors, or Manly, certainly not Manly, in my top 8. And not only did they play 2 below average teams, those teams had a bad day as well. Like Manly didn't have Tom Trbojevic and played shitty, and we know the Warriors did. So how good are the Tigers really? Until they play somebody really good, we won't have the answer to that question. So there's just pump the brakes a little bit because I don't think they're going to finish the season in number one. So for now, we're just waiting to see where this line ends up.
And it's like, I understand that like the Tigers blew out the Warriors last week, but the Tigers aren't the kind of team that's generally blowing out other teams. And I know that a lot of people kind of look at a line of 6.5 and go, oh fuck, Tigers could easily cover that against the Bulldogs. Historically, over a third of NRL games are decided between 1 and 6 points. So, it's quite often that the score is between 1 and 6, or the margin is between 1 and 6 come the end of 80 minutes. So, if anything, we're taking the Bulldogs there, but not at 6.5. We'll wait until that line climbs, if it does. And then the last game on the board is one of our favourites. We've got the Rabbits laying 12.5 points, hosting the Titans. 45.5 is the total. This is going to be a bit of an unpopular one, but we've got perfect situations here. We've got the Rabbits, who are 2-0, who have just beaten the Roosters, just absolutely pummeled the Dragons. The public could not be any higher on the Rabbits. We've got the Titans. The public could not be any lower on the Titans. They are 0-2. They've lost their halves. They are in an absolute desperation spot for mine. They're going to bring an absolute kitchen sink game for this one. I really do think that I know that the Rabbits are a better team here. Let's not kid ourselves. The Rabbits are the better side, but this line should not be 12.5 points. We had a look through our power ratings this morning. We kind of said even if accounting for home field, the Rabbits should maybe be 9.5 point favourites. But given all this, all the public money and everything that's happened over the first 2 weeks, with the Rabbits being probably the second most impressive team in the comp after the Storm, and the Titans being one of the worst in the comp. I really do think that, the Rabbits, this is a little bit of a letdown spot for them. I think that the Titans absolutely have to show up here. They have to give us something. And 12.5 points, they can lose by two converted tries and we still cover here. So we've got 3 plays on this one and possibly have more on the Titans come tomorrow morning.
2 converted tries and a field goal, in fact, because we even are buying another point.
Correct.
For another 5 cents there, which we think is worthwhile value there. Adam Reynolds could definitely slot a field goal. But yeah, if you've watched the 4 games this season that's involved these 2 teams, then you understand why the line is at 12.5. But the Titans have been terrible. They've got so much improvement, whereas the Bunnies have played really well. And I just think this line's way too high. This is the kind of line you should get for a team that has no hope, or you're questioning whether they're even going to show up. But of course the Titans are going to show up. How often do you get a team plus 12.5 where they probably have the better forward pack? And truly, I think the Titans do, not just on paper, but just on talent. Like, this team needs to rally around what Jai Arrow did last week, and they can win the forward battle here. And look, the halves is definitely a concern. Garth Brennan's acting all cool. Oh, I'm happy. We're creating chances. That's the important thing. We just need to convert a bit more. Well, it's actually a bit more than that. Yes, they did have some chances, but their attack is terrible, and it's not a good enough excuse that the both halves are out, because they're out again. But you still have a talented guy in AJ Brimson.
They have to improve after
you bought
the second
Riley
game,
Jacks, who started multiple games for the Storm in the halves, and Craig Bellamy wasn't saying when they didn't score, oh, I've got Riley Jacks there, so unfortunately we won't be scoring any tries today. Like, these are still, talented players who should be able to, in a team that should have some go forward. They should be very competitive in this one. And, the Bunnies are definitely a team that right now you don't necessarily want to go against. Cam Murray looks like a star. Sam Burgess is having as good a year as ever. But it is way too many points. And what the Titans need to be careful with, I suppose, is switching off, because they switch off for even 5 minutes in this game. The Bunnies has that killer instinct where they'll punish you, and we saw that against the Dragons. But other than that, I really see a competitive game, and I think we're catching way too many points, and hence we're going to grab a few best bets on this one.
Indeed, we're going to take the Titans plus 13.5 points. That one is $1.85 on Bet Easy. You'll find that in the alternate line section. We'll take the Titans plus 6.5 points in the first half and plus 6.5 points in the second half. Those are both $1.88 on Bet Easy. I see a comment flowing in from Sol. Jacob, I'll direct this one at you because you can't see any of the comments. It's a legitimate comment. He's basically just asking, with all the public money that's going to be flowing in on the Rabbits, and I've got an opinion on this, with all the public money flowing in on the Rabbits, would we be wise to kind of wait until it gets to 14, or are we better off taking it now? And I'll hand it over to you, but I've got my thoughts on this as well.
Yes, I think that when the bookies make this line, they probably even think that the line should be 9.5, kind of like what we said. And then they just know that there's going to be no friends for the Titans this week, and everyone loves the Bunnies, and they'll be in everyone's multi, either minus the points or just to win. And they inflate that line, and that's why we get value. And in some cases where we believe like the line may increase with public money, there are times where it's just too good to be true, and the public can move a line in one direction, but big money from sharp punters can also move it in the other direction. And you do see sometimes when a large line on an unpopular underdog actually comes in shorter, and you're thinking, well, there's no one in the public that would have been on that team, but it's sharp punters out there that are willing to put bulk coin down, and people like us, or at least what we used to be able to do. But it's no secret that we do influence some of the markets with the best bets we give out. And we know that 12.5 is great value. I do not see that getting to 14 at all.
Oh, I totally agree. And another thing that I would add is it's just a risk versus reward type thing. I mean, if you're going to wait, the chance that it goes to, let's say, 11.5, you're losing massively. If the sharps come in and it gets to 11.5, then you've lost huge, because 12 is one of the most key numbers in the NRL. But if it moves up a point and starts going to 13.5, even gets to 14, you've lost. But the benefit that you get, I guess the difference between 12.5 and 11.5 is much bigger than if it went up to 14. So we're grabbing it now in the assumption that 12.5 is pretty much as good as it's going to get, because I think, like Jacob said, even if the public comes in and smashes the Rabbits, I think that sharps will come in and take the Titans to push that line back down. That'll wrap it, guys. That's the full 8 games for round 3. Hopefully we can have another winning weekend. I mean, we didn't have back-to-back losing weeks last year, so hopefully we can continue on that. But make sure you guys are in the group, Tripod Punters Tips Forum on Facebook. That's where we have all the game threads and all sorts of tips in there. But the place to get our tips and to follow other expert tipsters, there's people absolutely crushing it, is the Tripod app. Just search that in the App Store or Google Play. It's completely free to download, and we'll post the rest of our best bets at around 1 p.m. tomorrow. Anything else you want to add, Jake, before we get out of here?
Thanks for listening, guys. Give us a rating on the iTunes podcast player as well, if you listen to this in podcast form. And a heads up again, if you're watching for the first time, that it's available as audio and you don't have to stare at our mugs, and you can listen to it on the go as well. But thanks for tuning in, and let's bounce back in round 3.
All right, see you guys Sunday, same time.